Good evening and welcome everyone. My name is Libby Moeller and I am the editorial coordinator for reporting fellowships here at the Pulitzer Center. As we wait for more folks to join us, please let us know using your chat feature where you're listening in from. I see a few familiar faces in the audience already, which is great. Including Linda Winslow, who was actually an advisor to both of these films. So welcome everyone. I'm coming to you from Connecticut in the United States. Thank you all for alerting me that our chat wasn't working. I think I may have fixed it now. So if you haven't joined us before, the Pulitzer Center is a nonprofit journalism and education organization. We support more than 170 reporting projects each year in collaboration with news outlets around the world, then work to elevate public engagement with those issues. While we are based in Washington, D.C., our staff and our work are global. Today, you'll be watching two films produced through our reporting fellowship programs with our university campus partners. Now, just to share a couple of logistics before we begin our screenings. You'll see a Q&A icon on your screen. You can begin adding your questions for our speakers at any time throughout the screenings of these two films. Following the screenings, we will have time for audience questions. There is also a chat icon on your screen, which now should be working. And we'd appreciate it if you use that chat box for specific tech-related issues. And then one final note, please do stay on a bit longer once this session ends to participate in a brief survey. Now, I would love to briefly introduce today's filmmakers who are joining us. Gopika Ajay is a co-director of To the Plate and a 2021 reporting fellow from the documentary program at Columbia University Journalism School. She currently teaches at the Asian College of Journalism in Chennai, India. To the Plate was also directed by Anik Laurent, who was unable to join us for this event today. Curtis Franklin is the director of the Friendliest Small Town in America and a 2020 fellow from our postgraduate program at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. He currently works as a video producer for Hearst Television. Welcome to both of you. We're now going to get started with our two film screenings, which have a total runtime of 55 minutes. And we will return after those screenings for a Q&A session with our filmmakers, so please do stay tuned after those screenings. And with that, enjoy. The films will start in just a moment. Hello again, everyone. I first just wanted to give a round of applause to our two filmmakers. I've seen those films a few times now, but they don't get old, and I was really happy to watch them again. So thank you both so much for sharing them with us. I am gonna jump into our Q&A portion of this event now, and I do want to encourage everyone. If you do have any questions for our filmmakers, please do add them to that Q&A box, because we would love to hear from you And I have a couple questions of my own, but then I'm going to turn to those audience questions. So yeah, just feel free to pop those in the Q&A box at any time. Gopika, I first wanted to start with a question for you, since we just wrapped up To the Plate. And, you know, of course, in your film, the COVID-19 pandemic is a pretty central focus. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how navigating filming throughout a pandemic made your film change, you know, throughout that process into something maybe you didn't expect, and how you accommodated that or kind of worked through those ever-changing conditions.
Right. Our film actually changed quite a lot. So like you said, it was changing constantly. So we filmed entirely during the lockdown. So we actually found the story and then filmed the story in the lockdown. So it started with an Instagram post that just showed up in my feed about gentrification in Chinatown, which is actually put up by Kyo. So Kyo is the other restaurant owner of Kopitiam, right? So she had put up a post. So that's really how it started. We got in touch with her, and then we interviewed her a couple of times, and she mentioned that she had a partner who's Moonlin back then. So the film, their lives have also actually evolved quite a lot since we made our film. Moonlin is no longer part of Kopitiam. So back then they were running the restaurant in partnership. And then we got in touch with Moonlin. So even when we were talking to Moonlin, the first couple of interviews that we did, we really didn't think that our film is going to be about Heart of Dinner. We were thinking, okay, our film is going to be about Kopitiam and you know, the restaurant and the xenophobia and all of that. And then I think in the second interview or something with Moonlin, she mentioned that we are usually a little busy on Wednesdays. So I will be available for interviews except on Wednesdays. And we were like, oh, what's wrong with Wednesdays? Like, why are you busy on Wednesdays? And that's how we actually found out that, oh my God, they're doing this initiative side by side. And we were really curious to know, you know, how you're taking it forward. What is it about? And then we got to know about the whole Heart of Dinner, and then Ian came into picture. And then so the movie really changed quite a lot from the gentrification post on Instagram. That's how it started. But we actually ended up making the film about Heart of Dinner. But I think the learning curve for Anik and I was that we still set the same story. You know, it is about racism, it is about xenophobia, it is about, but primarily for us, it's about the strength of the community and to stay positive when a lot of things were going wrong around them. So we made sense of the same reality, but with a different story. It felt like that. You know, it started off as a completely different story. We ended up making a completely different one, but we still made sense of the same reality. So yeah, that was a big learning curve for us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for telling us a little bit about, you know, the origin of that. And kind of keeping in that same vein, Curtis, I'd love to hear more about how you initially connected with Sherman. You know, he's your main character throughout this entire story. And I also think Sherman is in our audience today, so just quick shout out to him. But yeah, I would love to hear how you two initially connected and how you ended up deciding to tell this story through kind of his eyes.
Yeah, I think I first read about what Sherman was doing in Murray. I believe he was featured in a New York Times article just about Confederate monument removal across the U.S. At that time in summer 2020. You know, I was in the process of completing my thesis project and kind of reached out to a couple different parties. I ended up talking on the phone with Sherman one day, and it's, you know, funny looking back on it. He was totally open to me coming down and filming an interview or whatever it may be. And he would tell you this too, that he thought it was maybe going to be a couple days. You know, the statue is still standing, and then the fiscal court, he and others anticipated, would decide to have it removed. So really, he just kind of gave me a chance as a student, trying to complete my project, and in hindsight, just got really lucky finding him. I think I actually reached out through Murray State football to first get in touch with him, because he was a coach at Murray State, obviously, at the time, and just him having the courage to say yes and share his story with me and the world was incredible. So.
And you yourself, you were based in Kentucky too around that time, right? Is that correct?
Yes. So I was in Lexington, which is central Kentucky, about 4 hours away from Murray. My now wife and her family, they're all lifelong Callaway County residents. She was living there at the time. And so it was, the time of COVID where I, took negative COVID tests and then transferred bubbles and that whole thing. But we were able to work it out, once Sherman said I could come and interview him. So yeah.
One thing that really strikes me about both of your films is the sense of trust and connection that you appear to build with your sources and your central characters. So I'd love to just hear more about, how you went about connecting with them, because obviously the issues featured in these films are really personal, really hurtful, and really upsetting at times, or difficult to talk about. So maybe Gopika, if you could start just a little bit about how you connected with that community.
Yeah, it was, I think the toughest part about getting access, or the best way to get access, I believe, is to show a lot of patience, especially when they're going through a lot of things. I think the onus is on us to show a lot of patience and create that safe space for them to sort of open up. For us, it took a really long time, because it wasn't just about what they were going through as a community. It was also about the fear of virus at that point of time. So people didn't want to see each other no matter what. So we had to sort of navigate that first, and then get in touch with them. So we had a series of Zoom sessions before we actually showed up, in front of them. So by the time we actually physically showed up and said hi to Moonlin and Ian, we had actually met over Zoom a couple of times. So that really helped us. But they were very guarded, and I think rightfully so. So it took us a lot of it's a lot of patience, and it's a lot of waiting around and understanding what they're going through. And also, most importantly, I think letting them know what you're up to and what they're signing up for, so that they're not surprised at different points in the process of the filmmaking. So these are things that we could do. Like, we were very transparent as we could be. We did tell them that we will have to tag along for 5 to 6 months, to be able to capture what you're doing. So yeah, just being transparent, being patient, and just providing that platform for them to feel safe and for them to feel okay. They're just trying to tell us the story, well, we can let them in. So yeah.
I think for me, it was, I studied journalism in undergraduate school and kind of been taught the whole, it's you and the subject, and that's kind of the end of story. And I think, when I went to Northwestern, I wanted to learn the documentary filmmaking process. And one of the things I learned in that process was it's not necessarily the case through that. And I think making myself, I guess, comfortable to being more like a friend at times to Sherman and everything he was going through the process. I mean, obviously was sympathetic. I mean, how could you not be, regardless of your stance on the issue? So I'm not sure where in there I earned that trust. I'm very thankful for it, but I think maybe just going about it in an honest way. I wasn't a film crew or anything. I was a student at the time with my own camera, wanting to tell a good story. Really is what I set out to do, and whether Sherman recognized that or whatever it may be, I'm appreciative of it, and I think there's a very much just a human element of it, like I said, of being a friend, or just being a good person to someone else, especially as they're going through something like what Sherman did in his time in Murray.
So for both of you, it sounds like transparency, honesty, both really key, to that connection. And I know we have some of our newer reporting fellows joining us today on the call, or on the webinar. So hopefully, they're taking note of that great advice. I'll quickly turn to an audience question. One of our audience members is asking, how do we go about rebuilding the collective sense of community as a vital part of survival for one and all? I know that, Sherman, Moonlin, Yin, all of them really emphasize community in your film. So any thoughts you want to share on that audience question?
What's the question again? How do we go about creating?
Yeah, how do we go about rebuilding the collective sense of community as a vital part of survival for all of us?
Wow, that's a tough question. I'm not quite sure if I have the right answer for it, but what I can think of right now is even watching both the films, my film and his film. I think it comes down to action. Even let it be Moonlin, let it be Sherman, both of them took action against, for something that they believed in. And then you support whoever is taking the action. So I think it comes down to creating that sense of community. I think it boils down to taking action when you believe something has to be said or something has to be done. You just do it, and then the rest of the community will support you. I think that is very important, because I can see in both the films how both of them, both the main characters like Sherman and Moonlin, they took action. They did something about the situation, right? So to me, I think it is that.
Yeah, thank you, Gopika. Curtis, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think seeing Sherman as for all intents and purposes, an outsider in Murray, and when he decided to write the letter to local government, the support he got from that community, the community he found there, I think speaks volumes to that. And as far as rebuilding that sense of community, I think as horrific as it was sometimes to watch those interactions Sherman had, in the courthouse square on some of those days, the conversation with Garrett and Daryl, the young man who had the shotgun at the statue. Yeah, I think just they're front and center at the statue in most of that video I shot, and then to see Sherman have an honest conversation with them to the side. I thought one of the reasons I wanted to leave that in the film was it showed that kind of breaking down of differences. And I think it was really difficult during COVID, despite people being outside and protesting, to have those honest conversations. But I think if people are willing to come to the table, that is the closest thing to a good start. I think that's possible.
And now, Curtis, I have a couple of questions. A few of our audience members are wondering about, did you receive any pushback, any harassment while you were in the middle of making your film? And also wanting to know, in what ways did you notice the community change its understanding of the statue or its understanding of their history throughout your filmmaking process?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the perspective change, I think as time kind of waned on and you got to I think September 2020, and that Sherman was speaking to the court, and the county attorney kind of left this ambiguous interpretation for whether the statue could be moved or not. Along with when I went and talked to Garrett and Daryl, they they had been on the side from the get-go and of, this is history. You don't move that. You don't change that. And from talking with Sherman, they had spoken long before I'd met Sherman, but realizing that while this is an issue that is across the country, particularly in the South, that this is very much a community issue. And what you have here now is, people that don't want to, for example, go to the courthouse square on a Saturday because you have armed protesters protecting the statue, or bring their kids and their family near that. And I think that, realizing that something like that is not worth violence, I think breaking it down to that point and seeing where the community can move forward if they were to move the statue, I think it is kind of to me that was the evolution, their mindset shift on that, because you could argue back and forth all day with many people at the square about the history of the Civil War and why it was fought, and till the roosters crow about that. But to bring it to present day, what the statue means, at the time in the year 2020, and the symbol of divisiveness, it is in the community as the center point in the town square. Putting national politics or history or all that aside, if you're not going to win there, I think that seeing that conversation come up is hope for compromise in the future, and was kind of the biggest evolution I saw. I forgot the first part of the question. You said there was another question.
Yeah, just audience members wanting to know if you personally received any pushback throughout your filmmaking process.
Yeah, I really, just because I tried to be that, my whole goal with this piece was to do it in an observational style. Specifically, I hadn't really made a documentary of this length, or where you go out and you capture these events as they unfold. And so I wanted to do it in an observational manner. And for the most part, I got to be a fly on the wall. There were maybe a couple instances when I was filming on the square where, it's just someone says something like, you need to get out of here. But, I knew my rights as a journalist, and being able to record in public spaces. And so I was always confident in that. But I was lucky to not get as much pushback as I thought I would, at least during filming.
Gopika, back to the plate for a second. One thing that I really love about the film is I feel that it's a real story of hope and resilience, and a very inspiring look at how these two women really made a valuable change in their community. So I was just curious to know, as a filmmaker during COVID, during kind of working on that during a very difficult time for the world, what was it like for you to be working on a story surrounding hope and resilience during a kind of scary time?
Yeah, it was great. I think the one thing that I constantly thought about was that inspired me was that they were so positive. Not even once that, as Monlin or Yin said, anything negative about the situation. They were always talking about, okay, this is how we work around it. This is what we have to do. So we're going to find a solution. So they were always trying to find a solution to the problem that they had in their hands, and the fact that they did it in such a positive manner, so that was really reassuring at that point of time, because it was, like you said, it was very hard for Anik and I to complete it, and there were a lot of points where we thought I don't think we could complete it. There were a lot of points we thought, okay, we might have to just stop filming at the moment. But it was just their strength. More, of course, it's about strength of community, but more than that, it's about how they turned things on their heads. Like, it was so negative, it was so stressful, but they were only focusing on the positive aspects of things and just taking it forward. So that was very inspiring.
Well, it happened very quickly, but we're already nearing the end of our time together this evening or this morning. So just a couple more last questions that I'd love to know from both of you. What is one takeaway that you'd like to leave with our audience today about your film, about your characters, about the story that you've brought to us? Maybe Curtis, you can start.
Yeah, sure. I think looking back on it, it was a very stressful time, I guess, for me in my life. Capturing everything, and I put a lot of pressure on myself as I was capturing it, and now 2 years removed from it, I think in learning about the Civil War, American history, the intersection with the present day, and just how little time we have on this earth in an existential sense. I think being able to capture this and kind of leave it as almost like a time capsule for that moment in time, summer 2020, if you will. I hope it's something that's bigger than me and my existence, because I feel so small now, thinking in that scope of things, what the impact could be later on when people watch it maybe 50 years from now and try to get an understanding of what we went through as a society then. So that's kind of been my takeaway is putting what you could leave for future generations over your current state or whatever it may be. So
I think for me, I might be repeating myself here, but my takeaway, what I have learned from Moonlin and Ian and the whole process of storytelling, making that film, is that how important it is for us to have that sense of community. And we can always talk a lot about the strength of community, like we should have a sense of community, we should be there for each other. A lot of talking can be done about it, but I think at the end it boils down to that action. So when I say action, when something needs to be said, say it. When something needs to be done, do it. And don't think a lot about how it's going to be received. What needs to be said should be said. So I think it's that the fact that they took action no matter what. I think that's the sense of community that they brought in. So that was my takeaway.
Well, thank you both again so much. I'll give you one more silent little round of applause here. Curtis and Gopika, I just really appreciate both of your time, and thank you again for allowing us the chance to screen these films and bring them to our audience. I'm really appreciative. For those of you in our audience who are interested in future Pulitzer Center events, we're always doing webinars, or if you're in the DC area, we're starting to get back into in-person things slowly but surely as well. So I encourage you to stay tuned to our website, pulitzercenter.org/events. And just thanking you all again so much for being here. And please do remember, if you have a second, when we close out this webinar, if you can stay on for a brief survey. We really appreciate your feedback. So thank you all, and have a good night. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.